All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Experience Series, where of course we talk to industry leaders about their personal journeys and the insights that can only be garnered through lived experience. The Experience Series is brought to you by The Hive and Hive Life magazine. Before we get started, I just want to share a little bit about The Hive for those who are tuning in for the first time. The Hive is a network of flexible workspaces for businesses at every stage across Asia Pacific. To learn more about our memberships, our partnerships, and our event opportunities, please reach out to us via Facebook. Also, make sure to follow the Hive's Facebook page to be a part of all the buzz in our community. Once again, I am Shailene, and today I will be speaking with Michael Taylor, author, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, thought leader, radio and TV host. What a list. Michael, how are you? So glad
I
you're
am
here.
I am doing absolutely wonderful. Let me begin first of all by thanking you and the Hive for hosting this series, this talk. And I'm really excited to share. I'm a passionate entrepreneur
Yes,
and I just love inspiring people. So it's an absolute honor and pleasure to join you today.
absolutely. I'm so glad to have you on again. Obviously, this is the second time we're speaking. So I just know that everyone who's tuning in is in for a ride, a great conversation. This is such an international call because I just want to let everyone know that obviously you're in Texas right now. I'm over in Hong Kong. And it's funny because the first time we chatted for an interview for your Hive Life feature, that conversation had left such an impression on me. And then when we started like talking about having you on the Experience Series, that's when we discovered that you and I have this something in common, which is we have the same birthday and it's today. So
Yay!
yeah,
How
so
perfect, how perfect is that?
it's like I said, perfect storm, match made in heaven. I think this is going to be a great interview. Stars have aligned for this to be an amazing chat. So pumped to be able to chat with you again. So just for those who are tuning in, Michael Taylor is the CEO and founder of Creation Publishing Group and the author of several books, from Brothers, Are You Listening? And The Cure for Loneliness, a Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose. And of course, his latest book, The New Face of Entrepreneurship, an entrepreneur's guide to joy, passion, and profits in business. So, Michael, you are someone who is you're just so sure-footed in your beliefs and in your drive and in your purpose. So I'm really excited for those tuning in at home to be able to hear your insights and learn about your experiences because you have a great story. So before we dive right in, I just want to let everyone know, for those watching, we will, as usual, be hosting a Q&A session at the end of the interview portion. So for those who want to ask Michael any questions, make sure to leave your questions in the comment section of the Experience Series live stream, and my colleague will be sending them my way so I can ask Michael. All right, now we got all that out of the way. Let's get straight into it. Obviously, the first time we spoke, you told a really fantastic story about the moment you sort of knew you wanted to become an entrepreneur. So could you tell us that story and how that ambition came to be?
Well, when I was 10 years old, I remember a conversation I had with my grandfather. And my grandfather was this guy that I think he may have had an eighth grade education, but he was probably the smartest man that I've ever met. And even though I was just a kid, he would sit me down and we would have these amazing conversations about everything, about life, about business, about race. And he didn't really treat me as a kid. He treated me almost as though I were an adult. We would just sit and talk. And I remember one day I walked up to him and I said, Grandpa, when I grow up, I'm going to be rich. And he asked me, well, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, when I grow up, I'm going to own my own company. And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he said, that's a really great goal to have. He said, but if you're going to be rich, he said, I'm going to share the two secrets with you that if you will learn these secrets, I can promise you, you can become rich. He said, lesson number one, if you're going to be rich, you have to learn to think like rich people. He said the only difference between rich people and poor people is how they think. Right. And he said the second thing you have to do is you have to learn to listen. He said because rich people will tell you how they got rich. And so you have to listen and learn from them so that you can become rich also. So at 10 years old, that seed was planted in my mind that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, at 13, I read the book Think and Grow Rich. And that was the book that really shaped my thinking about being an entrepreneur and about being successful. And it is sort of my Bible as an entrepreneur.
Right. So what was it about that book that sort of pulled you in? Do you have anything that like stands out to you after all these years?
Well, I remember at 13, I had a really difficult time pronouncing one word, and it was definiteness. And in the book, he talked about having a definiteness of purpose.
Right.
And I remember thinking, what in the world is, I didn't understand definiteness, and I couldn't say it, kind of like I can't now. But there was something about that word that really stood out for me. And as I've grown and matured, I recognize the importance of having that definiteness of purpose, knowing with every fiber of your being what it is that you're here to do. And I feel blessed to know exactly why I was put on this planet.
See, and that is exactly what I got from your book when I read it. So obviously I'm gonna ask you so much about your divine purpose and that amazing book that you wrote. But before that, I wanna sort of preempt this with quite an important question, because I think it's an interesting one. You mentioned that you believe there's no better time to be an entrepreneur. What makes you say that?
Well, first of all, I am an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible. That is the lens through which I see the world. I recognize all the challenges that the world is currently facing. And I also believe in divine principles and laws. And so what I believe is there's a divine law called breakdown, breakthrough. So currently the world is in major breakdown.
Right.
But I believe breakdown always is preparation for breakthrough. So ultimately, humanity is going to have a major breakthrough. Now, I have no idea how long that's going to take, but what I do know is that the universe is absolutely perfect. There's a divine intelligence that set everything in motion, I believe. And so this breakdown, breakthrough principle, if you look through nature, you'll see it in everything that grows. For example, if I have a seed, and I plant that seed in the ground, it's got to go through that breakdown period to gain the roots to secure itself into the ground before it expresses itself. Well, right. Humanity is the same way. It's like we've been planted and we're building these roots of humanity, I believe. And so I see the lens through this really positive, optimistic outlook, primarily because of my belief in that power which is greater than myself, which I choose to call divine intelligence.
I mean, I think obviously we're going to get into this a bit later, but based on your story and the Hive Life feature that we've put out there, your article, you have gone through a lot of adversity. So the fact that you are, spreading this message so widely, it shows that, I mean, you're a testament to the fact that that's true. So I think that's amazing. So you mentioned in your book that the 3 primary obstacles in starting a business are no longer excuses to not start a business. So what are those 3 obstacles, and why do you believe they no longer are factors?
Well, if you go back, let's just say 50 years. I'll just say 50. Mm-hmm. See, to start a business, you basically had to have some sort of business degree. You had to have some interconnection. So it was important to have the education, because a lot of people didn't have access to learning about marketing and learning about accounting, because you didn't have access to that information. But now there's no limits to the access of information and education that anyone can achieve. I am blown away by the amazing thing called the internet.
Yes.
I can learn anything I want to through the internet. So the excuse of not having an education is no longer applicable, because right now, if you want to start a business, if you want to learn how to run a business, I don't care what you want to do, you have access to that education through the internet. Absolutely. So that's the first barrier. Education is no longer a barrier to becoming an entrepreneur. Right. Secondly, there was a time when there were 3 words that pretty much assured your success in business. And those 3 words were location, location, location.
Right.
So back in the day, if you had a business, hopefully you could position it somewhere where you had lots of traffic and people saw your company, and that location really predicated whether or not you would succeed or not. Yeah. Well, guess what? You are no longer limited by location. As a matter of fact, you can do business around the globe from the comfort of your little home. So
Definitely.
location is no longer a barrier, no longer a restriction for entrepreneurs. And last but not least, there was a time, and obviously one of the greatest challenges of an entrepreneur is funding.
Mm,
How do you get the funding to launch your business? Well, there was a time when it took a lot of capital to start a business. Now you can start a business basically with $0, to be honest.
yeah.
For example, as a speaker, I started my first blog, cost me absolutely nothing to set the blog up. I started building clientele through my blog for nothing except my monthly internet fee. And so I started gaining a following through writing a little blog. My blog secured speaking outside of my business. So I started a speaking business basically with $0. So the amazing thing about what's happening today is, yes, it's still challenging to find funding, but we now have so many different opportunities to receive funding, like crowdfunding campaigns. I'm sure you're familiar with crowdfunding campaigns like
Yeah.
Kickstarter and those things. So there's really no excuse not to start a business or to become an entrepreneur. And what's happening is, and this is what I believe, if you look at the economy right now, it appears to be in shambles because obviously the COVID crisis and a lot of businesses are closing and a lot of people are losing their jobs. But at the same time, a lot of people are turning to entrepreneurship because they no longer want to rely on other companies, right? So
Yeah.
there's this thrust into entrepreneurship for people, some out of desperation,
Yeah.
some out of passion. But the good news is there are so many opportunities out there for those of us who are willing to put forth the effort and to make our dreams come true as entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. Very well put. I think what's very interesting about you is that you don't strike me as the kind of person who gets nervous, like at all. It's typical for, everyone who's tuning at home, it's typical for interviewees to ask for the questions prior to an interview. This guy is just like, nah, I don't need it. I want to go just like dive straight into the deep end. So what I want to ask you is just, I remember asking you this last time, but you don't get nervous. So when you do things like you're a radio host or you're a TV host and you're public speaking, what is going on in your mind? Because I want to know, like, what is it like in the mind of someone who just seems quite calm and collected?
Well, to really understand that, we have to go back a little while. So again, I was living the American dream at 23 years old, right? I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all of that. And I was working in corporate America. And within about a 6-year time frame, that dream turned into a nightmare as I went through a divorce, bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep state of depression. I was actually homeless for 2 years living out of my car.
Right.
Now, during that time period, I received a miracle. I was sitting up late one night because I was too depressed to sleep. And I was sitting at the edge of my bed, looking across the room at my bookshelf, when I happened to notice that every book on my bookshelf had something to do with getting rich and making money. Now, remember the conversation I had with my grandfather when I was 10?
Yeah.
And he told me to learn to listen? Well, I listened and I was reading all these books, right, to get rich. Well, as I looked at those books, this question just popped in my head. Michael, what if you took all the energy and effort you've used in trying to get rich and simply figure out how to be happy? Now, as simplistic as that question sounds, it literally changed and saved my life in an instant. Something in me shifted, and all of a sudden my depression lifted, and I had this amazing clarity that I was going to be able to rebuild my life, and it was going to become extraordinary. And as a result of asking that question, I stopped reading books on getting rich and making money. I started reading books on psychology, philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics, personal development. And I went on what I'll call a journey of transformation. And it was this journey that literally transformed me from the inside out. And it was an extremely difficult and challenging journey, which it began with my willingness to go to therapy to address a lot of childhood trauma that I had not noticed or didn't know was impacting my life as an adult. And so I was able to heal through that and move through that trauma. And in this process, I simply came to an understanding of who I am as a human being. And so this confidence, this knowingness, the reason I don't get nervous is because I am so connected to my authentic self as a result of this 25-year personal growth journey that I've been on. I'm just in what I call the universal groove. It's a universal flow of life, and I
Oh my
love it.
God. I'm going to use that universal groove. I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that sort of brings me to what you definitely emphasized in our previous interview, which was intuition. So in your book, you talk a lot about the importance of intuition. So can you give us an instance or maybe a life experience where intuition has really served you well?
Well, in our culture, for the most part, we've been taught to believe that intuition is for women.
Hmm.
We hear the term women's intuition,
Yeah,
and a lot of men don't think they have intuition.
right.
Well, rest assured, all human beings have intuition. And intuition, in some ways, you could define it as that still small voice within you. And we all have that still small voice. If you don't know what it is, it's that voice that just asked you, what's that still small voice he's talking about? We all have it, right? We have this inner voice. Now, it is my belief that that inner voice, that intuition, is actually our connection to divinity. It is our connection to that which is greater than ourselves. Now, you can call and label that thing whatever you want. You can call it God, you can call it the universe, I don't think the name matters, but creating an intimacy and a connection with it. When you connect to it, you start listening to and pay attention to these impulses. And that's what intuition is. It's just like it could be a thought, it could be a feeling, but there's something that will begin to guide you as you go on this journey. And that's the intuition. And we all have access to it. Now, in terms of being an entrepreneur, a lot of times we are very left brain oriented. We think in terms of numbers and stats and statistics and marketing. But see, right brain people, or what I would call the intuitive types, are the ones who are the real creators.
Right.
Because they learn to listen to that still small voice, that intuition within them. And so for those of us who are willing to tap into our intuition, it definitely supports us as entrepreneurs because that's where creative ideas come from. That's where innovation comes from. And connecting to that, I can assure you, removes a lot of stress from your life because you recognize that when stuff happens, because stuff will happen, you have access to something that will help you navigate whatever that stuff is, whatever challenge that comes up. When we learn to listen to that still small voice within us, it's these divine ideas that kind of show up. They go, oh, okay, so I'm having a problem with this piece of my business. Well, guess what? If I learn to be quiet and still my mind, I can assure you you're more likely to get answers, okay? So for me, listening to my intuition is more important than listening to my intellect. I trust my feeling more than I do my brain. And that's because I'm connected to that divine energy intelligence that I told you about.
Yeah. So, wow, that's really interesting. I think, do you believe that it's because your intuition is sort of tied to your gut and your intellect might be affected by ego? Is that?
Well, here's another way to look at it. So as human beings, we have what I call the little s self and the big S self.
Right.
Self with a little s, some people would probably call the ego self.
Right.
But the big S self, your divine self, that's what's connected to your divinity. And so through the process of my transformational journey, what I've simply learned to do is not listen so much to the little s self as I do the big S self. The
Right.
big S self, once again, is that higher self. It's where all creativity comes from. It is, I believe, your connection to source. Now, here's another way to think about it. I'm going to give you a visual.
Yes.
So imagine you're born, right? And you land in this room, and it's a all white room, and the only thing in the room is a little cot, right? A little lay down cot. Now, when you're born, there's really two of you. Okay.
Mhm.
So two of you are in this room. Now, when you're first born, the little s self is laying on the cot. It's
Right.
asleep. The big S self is what's awake, and you're making all these decisions and you're learning with the big S self from birth to about 7.
Mm.
Okay. You're fully conscious and you're paying attention to your higher self. That's why you learn. That's why, as a child, when you learn to walk, if you fall down, do you say, "Oh man, I can't walk. I don't want to learn"? No. What does a kid do? He gets up and keeps trying until he figures it out, right? Well, that's
Absolutely.
because he's paying attention to the big S self. Now, as we grow up, we start getting conditioned. We start listening to our parents, we start listening to the world, and they start telling us all these things that in a lot of cases are very limiting. So now what happens is the little S self gets up, the big S self lays on the cot. So now we're being controlled by the little s self. And it's basically our conscious mind. Our conscious mind is taking in all this information and processing it. But the true power is in the big S self that is laying on the cot. So our job, and this is why I believe meditation is so important. Meditation allows you to quiet your little s self and put it back on the cot, and your big S self now runs the show. Now, some people see the ego as something that's bad. No, it's just a part of you. And so the little S self's job is one thing, and that's to protect you from pain. The only reason the little S self shows up is because something happens and you go, "Oh, I got to protect myself." And that's what forms the little S self. So again, it's a defense mechanism, if you will, that's part of the human condition. But if we engage in this transformational journey that I'm talking about, we learn to recognize that that little s self is always there. It's not bad, it's just there. But if we operate from the big S self, then miracles happen.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's definitely true because I think for example, am someone who tends to stress out very easily. So I think, meeting someone like you who has achieved so much and has achieved it with such a sense of calm, it's very refreshing to see that that's even possible. Because I mean, yeah, I think that is the sort of advantage of meditation, one of the many. So very well put. I wanted to ask you another thing about something you mentioned in your book. So you mentioned that there are 3 types of compensation that an entrepreneur receives. Could you speak a little bit about that? What are they?
Absolutely. So first of all, let's define entrepreneur. This is how I define entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is simply someone who receives compensation in exchange for a product or a service.
Right.
Okay, that's Michael Taylor's definition of an entrepreneur.
Right.
So when you think about compensation, the overwhelming majority of people think, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to be compensated financially. I want to make money, right?
Yeah.
So let's get this real clear. Absolutely nothing wrong with making money. That's one of the reasons you go into business. You want to be profitable. Otherwise, you don't have a business. So there's nothing wrong with making money. But this is where too many entrepreneurs get tripped up. They only focus on financial compensation.
Right.
So the other 2 types of compensation. Number 2 is emotional compensation. And emotional compensation arises from just feeling good about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So for me, as an entrepreneur, I absolutely love writing books. If I never sold a single book, I would still write books. Why? Because emotionally, it makes me feel good. I love it. I love writing books. There's joy that comes from writing. Now, a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't like writing." But see, when you're connected to your divine purpose, then you have this joy in expressing your gifts
And that's exactly what I'm doing. Writing is a gift, and I get a lot of joy from expressing it. So therefore, that's my emotional compensation. And then there's spiritual compensation. And spiritual compensation arises from a belief that you are fulfilling a divine purpose.
Right.
And so for me, I recognize and fully believe that once again, there is this divine intelligence that created this universe. And this intelligence is actually expressing itself through me as me. Okay. So spiritual compensation is the most important compensation for me. So that's how I prioritize compensations. First of all, it's spiritual. Next, it's emotional. And last, but definitely not least, it's financial. And
Right.
so I'm sure you've heard the term, if you do what you love, the money will follow,
Yeah.
which is extremely true. But there is a caveat that you have to add to that. It'll only follow if you know how to market. so,
Ooh, yes.
so,
Very
so,
true.
so you can't just love it and not get it out there. So let's add that little caveat to it. Do what you love and the money will follow as you promote and market what you love.
Yeah. You got to get seen to be seen, right? So
Yeah. So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
you got to get it out there.
Right. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about, obviously, our first conversation was based on your other book, The Cure for Loneliness. So first off, can you just sort of define for our audience what is loneliness and what is your experience with loneliness?
Okay, I define loneliness as a feeling of separation and disconnection from others because of race.
Yeah.
Now, this is how this came about. There's a guy on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Jewel Love. He's a therapist, and he works with some of the brightest, wealthiest Black men in the country. Right, Silicon Valley types, CEOs, teams at Google and Apple and everything. So he deals with these guys, and he put a post on LinkedIn that said, "The greatest mental health challenge facing Black men is loneliness."
Right.
And I'd never heard that term before, but I immediately resonated with it
Yeah.
because it's a feeling that I've had most of my life. And so as I read his comments, I thought to myself, I understand where he's coming from. And not only that, there's a cure.
Right.
And I know what the cure is because my primary focus is on the changing roles of manhood and masculinity in society. And most of my books are written towards that. But when I thought about it, I said, Black men specifically now more than ever need reasons for optimism, need reasons for hope. And I said, I'm going to write the cure for this thing called loneliness. And so I sat down and came up with some ideas, and it has really resonated with people. And it's not just about Black. Anyone that, and I really dislike this word, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute, but when you're a minority in a setting that you're the only person of color, then that's where you can experience this feeling of loneliness. Maybe you're, being judged just because of the color of your skin. Maybe you're being judged just because you're a woman. So there's lots of caveats to it. But the point that I make in the book, and this was speaking specifically to Black people, is I think one of the most disempowering beliefs that we hold is that we're minorities. So I want you to think about that word for a moment. What does that mean, minority? See, to me, it sounds like someone who's powerless. Now, when you think about it, a minority could be just because there's a fewer people, and you're a minority because of the amount of people. Technically, that's what minority might mean. But minority is also a mindset. And if you get trapped in this mindset that I am a minority, it will keep you trapped in victimhood. It will keep you from fully expressing who you are as a human being.
Right.
So regardless of your ethnicity, it's important to embrace the idea that you as you're watching this right now, as you're listening to this, you are a divine manifestation of the infinite intelligence that created this universe. Therefore, you are divine. And if you buy into this label called minority, you'll stay stuck, you'll stay trapped, and you'll play small your whole life. So when I say that, in no way am I asking anyone to deny their ethnicity. You should be proud of ethnicity, whatever that is, but do not ever attach to a label called minority, because that's not who and what you are.
Right. We're all about getting rid of those limitations, right? Especially the ones that might be mental, but absolutely. Just a reminder before we continue, just a reminder to those tuning in, if you have any questions for Michael Taylor, please make sure to leave them in the comment section of the experience series. I will be shooting them his way very shortly. But before we jump into that, I have quite a few more questions for you, to be honest. So in your book, you say, spiritual compensation arises from a belief that we are fulfilling a divine purpose. For those who believe in a power greater than themselves, their purpose is to acknowledge that power by sharing their gifts and talents with the world. So this might be an obvious question, but I want to see what you have to say anyway. What do you think the world stands to gain from successful business owners and thought leaders who have done that spiritual inner work?
Well, once again, I am an irrepressible optimist.
Yeah.
So what I believe is happening is that there's a shift that's occurring, especially with entrepreneurs. Have you heard the term heart-centered businesses?
Oh, yes, actually, yeah.
Okay.
I've heard purpose-driven businesses a lot more though, but yeah.
There's purpose-driven businesses or heart-centered businesses. So this shift that's occurring, I believe, is the result of human evolution. I believe human beings are still evolving. And one of the things that's evolving is our whole view about capitalism. So a lot of times you'll hear politicians demonize capitalism. You know, you hear things like the richest 1% makes more money than the bottom 80%. You know, you hear all these negative things about capitalism and billionaires and people that make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, capitalism isn't the problem. Capitalist can be the problem. If you're a capitalist and you're greedy and you are simply there to make money and receive financial compensation, chances are you're not running a heart-centered business. Right. But at the same time, if you buy into my idea that spiritual compensation should be first priority, then you're more likely to become or be a heart-centered or purpose-driven business. Because the intention of a heart-centered business is to take your unique gifts and talents and share them with the world. And in sharing them with the world, you will receive compensation for what you're putting into the world. So a heart-centered business, someone who loves what they're doing and they're doing it for the betterment of humanity, I believe they will be compensated accordingly. And so people sometimes will try to, let's say, shortcut this process saying, well, I'm a heart-centered business, but in their heart, they're really not. They're just trying to make money. But see, you have to understand the universe is perfect. And I believe in divine karma. What we put out comes back. And so if our heart is in the right place and we're doing what we love and we have a great business plan and a great product and a great service, we will be compensated. So my belief, my commitment and intention is to one day become a billionaire. Now, I define a billionaire as someone who positively impacts the lives of 1 billion people.
Wow, I did not see that coming.
So that to me is a billionaire. Now, here's the amazing thing about that. As an entrepreneur, if you figure out a way to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people, I guarantee you, your bottom line will show that you're a billionaire on the bottom line.
Mm.
But the intention has to be pure. You have to have an internal commitment, a spiritual connection to that which is greater than yourself, knowing that you're doing it to make the world a better place, and figure out a way to impact that many people's lives. I promise you, the universe will support you with amazing success.
Absolutely. I love that. So you have one chapter entitled It's Not About the Money. And then you also have another chapter titled It's All About the Money. So, some might say that's a contradiction, but I would love it if you could explain to the audience what that's about.
Well, when I say it's not about the money, it comes back to doing what you love.
Mm.
Now, there are 3 ways to know when you're doing what you love. Do you know what they are?
No.
I'm about to share with you.
Enlighten me, please.
So, number 1, when you're doing what you love, you do it without the thought of compensation.
Mm.
You do it because you love it. As I mentioned at the beginning, I love writing. If I never got paid, never sold a book, I'd still write. Why? Because I love it. Okay.
Right.
So that's the first way to know it. You'll do it without the thought of compensation. Number 2, when you're doing what you love, time literally disappears.
Mm.
You get so in the moment present to what you're doing, time just goes away.
That's true. That's happening in this conversation right now. Yeah. Megan may love my job. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So when you're doing what you love, time literally just disappears. So as a writer, as I mentioned, I love writing. Honestly, I can sit at my computer for 8 to 12 hours, and I swear it feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it just sort of pours out of me, and it's amazing. So when you're doing what you love, time disappears. And last but not least, when you're doing what you love, you want to share it with others.
For sure.
Now, you want to share it, not to brag or to boast, but you want people to experience that which you love doing so much. And that's how you share it. There's this, as a writer, people come to, book signings and stuff, and they go, "Oh man, I loved your book, but I love your energy even more."
Yeah.
So I'm sharing a part of myself, right? Through my writing and through my words and through my work. But it's that wanting to share to help make the world a better place. That's what a heart-centered entrepreneur does. And that's what I do. And that's why it's important to understand that doing what you love, it's no longer about the money. It's about being passionate about what you love and sharing it with the world. Now, it's important to understand purpose. So this is how I see it. When you know what you love to do and you're good at it, and that's another thing you have to understand, because a lot of people love certain things, but they're not really good at it. For example, I know a lot of people who love to sing, but they really shouldn't be singing, but they love to sing. Here's what I know. When you find your divine purpose, not only will you love it, but you'll be really good at it. I can promise you. So when you know what you love and you're doing it because you love it, that's your purpose. Because if you take that which you love and then figure out a way to share it with others to make the world a better place, there's an intersection. That which you love, that which makes the world better, at that intersection is your divine purpose. So when you're doing what you love and you're helping people, you're on purpose.
I love that. So if you had to put it maybe in a sentence or two, what would you define your divine purpose as?
My divine purpose is to empower people to transform their lives from the inside out.
Coach Michael Taylor.
That's me.
That's our
that's my purpose.
I love it. Okay.
And I do that through my books, my writing, my speaking, and so forth.
For sure. I mean, I was so excited for this interview. Like I said, I was like, I want this to be the first thing I do on my birthday, because I knew it would just start the day off so well, and it has. So you mentioned that there's no such thing as failure. Now, I think most of us have heard that before, but I want to know, what do you mean by that?
Well, let me back up just a little bit, because we talked about it's not about the money, but it is about the money. And
Yes.
so the is about the money means, as an entrepreneur, you must understand the mechanics of starting and running a business. So
Sure.
when I say it is about the money, it's about gaining the knowledge to understand the mechanics of running a business. So it's not about the money, do what you love, but it is about the money because you got to figure out how to run your business. So I just want to tie it in.
Yeah, no, I think that makes all the sense in the world. Like, you got to love what you do, and the money shouldn't be the main thing on your mind, but you still got to know how to, I mean, this is the real
Absolutely.
world after all. You still got to know how to play the game, right?
Absolutely. So let's talk about failure, which there is
Okay.
no such thing.
Mm.
My teacher, my mentor, is a guy named Wayne Dyer.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, Dr. Dyer passed away a couple of years ago. But he's probably the most influential person in my life, other than my mom, in terms of how I think. He really helped shape how I think.
Mm.
And he said this. He said, there's no such thing as failure. There is only the non-attainment of a desired result. So we all want to achieve certain things. We want to create a result. And if we don't create that result, we see that as a failure sometimes. But the downside is, too many times, especially entrepreneurs, if they don't attain that desired result, then internally they feel like a failure. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm not smart enough. Oh, so this conversation in our head will convince us that we didn't just fail, but we're failures. And that can be devastating, because if you feel like a failure, you're unlikely to try to do something else, right?
Yeah.
So if we will just reframe that there's really no such thing as failure, there's just, we set an intention or we want to create a result, it didn't happen, and that's it.
Right.
End the story. So what we do is we create a new intention. We create a new result that we want to achieve. Tons and tons of times, we're not going to attain the result that we want, but if we stay focused and committed, and this is why I believe it's so important to have that spiritual connection. Because if you believe, as I do, that there is this divine intelligence that's supporting you as you're doing these types of things, when things don't work out, then you can say, okay, I'm not being rejected, I'm being redirected.
Mm.
So this thing called failure isn't failure. I'm just being redirected to something better. So as an entrepreneur, trust me, traditionally, I've failed a ton of times. I've started several businesses that didn't work out. But never did I say, oh, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
I just said, I need to find another business that I can make work.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about it is, at the beginning, when I started businesses, I started out the businesses for the wrong reason. I was just trying to make money. I had no sense of spiritual connection. I had no sense of the things that we're talking about. I was your typical entrepreneur that was trying to figure out how to get rich.
Right.
And that's why I failed, because my heart wasn't in the right place. My heart was in the wrong place. But now the beauty of it all is that I do what I absolutely love to do. And I'm able to take the knowledge and the passion that I have and monetize it through my company. And that's amazing to me.
It is amazing. Yeah. I mean, you've come so far. So again, you're a testament to what can be achieved when you sort of just get out of your own way and you shift your thinking. So that's amazing. I have essentially one last question for you before we head into the Q&A session of this interview. What advice would you give to up and coming entrepreneurs?
The first thing I want to say is chill out.
Oh, that's really good advice.
Chill out.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how, especially as entrepreneurs, we get so tied up in knots, wanting to succeed, wanting to be successful. And it's great to have goals and dreams, but not at the expense of your inner peace.
Right.
So I believe as an entrepreneur, if you will learn to prioritize, once again, for me, spiritual, emotional, financial.
Mm.
So that spiritual component is the result of doing your own inner transformational work.
Right.
So it means learning and coming to the understanding of who you really are. In other words, how do you connect to your big S self?
Mm.
Connecting to your big S self is the key to your joy, your peace, your happiness, and your success. And it's a process. You have to be willing to go through the process. See, we live in this culture of quick fixes and instant gratification.
Yeah.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's a process. The universe operates on principles and laws. And so if we learn to just chill out first, take a chill pill, relax,
Mm.
stop stressing out so much.
Yeah.
Know that everything is in divine order. And as long as my heart is in the right place and I'm willing to put forth some action, things will work out. So chill out would be my advice.
That's great advice, and I will be taking notes on that for sure. All right, I think it's time to head to our audience and see what they want to know from you. So we have a question from Jerome. So he says, "Hey guys, thank you very much for this session. It's super inspiring." He wants to ask, when you say that we need to market ourselves, could you explain how to do that?
Well, the beautiful thing about technology today is that we have access to eyeballs all over the world, and that's called marketing. How do we get our stuff in front of people? Social media is an amazing gift to entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
To be able to put your stuff out there in front of people for little or no cost, actually, if you're willing to learn how to do Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But marketing, again, is just about getting what you do out so that people can see it. Now, here's something that I had to overcome as an entrepreneur. And I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but it's, have you ever heard the term imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, yes. Definitely. Did I answer too quickly? I don't know.
So as entrepreneurs, we have these big goals, these big dreams, but if we aren't willing to look deeply within ourselves, and if we have this fear that we're not good enough, and I'm just maybe shouldn't be trying to do some of this stuff because I just don't have enough confidence in myself. See, that type of thinking will sabotage you as an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So when you start marketing yourself, if you don't have the confidence to put yourself and your stuff out there, then that's the first place you have to start before you start promoting yourself. You've got to gain the confidence and faith in yourself and your products and your services before you start marketing. Because if you're insecure, I don't care if you pay somebody $1 million to market you out there, you're going to freeze. You're going to go, oh, I can't do this. And so you got to be willing to confront some inner demons sometimes. And those inner demons are really just insecurities that we have, and you can overcome them, but you have to be willing to acknowledge them and make sure that you aren't sabotaging your business by being afraid to put yourself out there. Because marketing is about putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the term self-rejection. People do that so often where they want to pursue something, but they think they're underqualified, or they, just will fail at it from the get-go. So that makes a lot of sense that in any interaction, whether you're chatting to someone about your business, or you go and host a webinar, or you post something on LinkedIn, it's really all about getting past that mental barrier of like, people aren't going to care what I'm going to say, or things like that. So amen to that. Absolutely. All right. So our next question is, how do you advocate for inclusion in your business? That's an interesting.
Well, I am a solopreneur.
Right.
So as a solopreneur, at this particular point in my business, I don't have other employees. But here's what I believe. All human beings are the same.
Yeah.
I believe in diversity. I believe there are so many advantages to diversity because all these different people have different ideas and different ways to deal with challenges within a business. So rest assured, as my company grows and I start bringing people in, it will be a diverse group of people because I know the benefits are so amazing. I would not want to have people that only think like me in my business.
Yeah.
I need people who aren't so optimistic, some who are skeptical and will reel me back in because I can be kind of pie in the sky, floating. And actually that's what my wife does really well. So it's really important to understand the importance of having people in your circle that, number one, have the same intention, but they may see it just a little differently, but ultimately they know that here's the goal. We're all committed to the goal. Now, you may have a different way of getting there. I may have a different way of getting there, but we still want to get to the same place. And I believe diversity can do that. And so that's why I love the idea of diversity, because I know the benefits of bringing in different ways of thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, this question. It's all right. Whose job is it to shatter stereotypes, which ties in with what you were just saying? And what is something that non-POC do to reinforce stereotypes in the workplace that people might not be very aware of?
Well, I coined a term called the CWBS, and I wrote about this in my book, Shattering Black Male Stereotypes. CWBS stands for Collective White Belief System. So in this country, we have the majority of people who happen to be white. Yeah. So collectively, there's a thought system or belief system based on the majority of people who are here. So if you look at America, when this country first began, the collective white belief system said, Black people were inferior, Black people were less than, and so forth. So that was a collective way of thinking. Right. So that's now shifting because of human evolution. And so who's responsible for shattering stereotypes? Well, first of all, every individual is responsible to make sure they aren't acting consistent with stereotypes. So as a man who happens to be Black, I recognize that there are a lot of stereotypes out there that they have about Black people. I make sure I don't do anything consistent with those stereotypes. So that's my responsibility. Collectively, though, as a country, specifically here in America, it's important for us to understand when we see all this racial tension that's going on, it's really about collectively, how can we get the country to shift their way of thinking so that we can move the country forward? Now, it is my belief, as difficult as it's for me to say this, I actually believe President Trump was a good thing to happen to America. And here's why. America sort of went to sleep on racism because we chose a Black president. A lot of people thought, we have a Black president, racism's over.
Yeah.
No.
We're good. The work is done. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
No. So racism is still here, no question. We still have some systemic issues in this country that needs to be resolved. But what Trump has done is brought or shined the light on those dark parts of the CWBS psyche to let people recognize, maybe we were wrong about this racism thing. Maybe it is still real, and it is very, very real, and he's brought light to that. So once again, the optimist in me says, the good news is more and more people collectively in this country are recognizing, yes, we still have a ways to go in terms of race relations, but if we look at the trajectory that we're on, there's reasons for optimism. Right. Because we have to understand this country is less than 250 years old. And so we're still growing. We're still a relatively young country. And so, yeah, there's breakdowns that are happening right now in race relations. But ultimately, once again, I believe in the breakthrough principle. Ultimately, humanity will break through and we'll figure this out and everything will work out.
Yes, I love that. I believe that too. So amazing. All right, our next question. How do you deal with negative thoughts or anger when it comes to work? I'm assuming this is because you just seem like such a positive guy. So that's not to say that you don't get angry, right? Do you?
Right. So once again, you have to remember 25 years of deep self-introspection and healing, okay, on my part. Do I get angry? Absolutely. I'm human. But what I recognize is I'm 100% responsible for my thoughts.
Yeah.
If I change my thoughts, I can change how I feel.
Yeah.
If I allow myself to buy into all the negativity and I'm thinking negative thoughts, I'm going to feel that in my body. I'm going to feel negative. So one of the things I coach people on is to minimize or eliminate the amount of negativity they allow in their minds.
Right.
In other words, stop watching Fox News. Stop watching, stop tuning into the news, because we have to understand that thoughts are like seeds, okay? We plant these seeds in our mind and they will grow. So if we're planting all these negative seeds, guess what? We're going to feel negative. We're going to feel that in our bodies. So for me, I simply pay attention to what I'm thinking. And if I catch myself in negativity, I can interrupt that and I can go, whoops, new thought, change that. Don't think that. And in doing that, trust me, and this is why I think meditation is so important, because most of us are unconscious of what we're thinking. We don't even know we're just on this automatic, hamster wheel. We're just going around with these same thoughts every day. It's been said that, human beings have 50,000 thoughts a day. And 80% of the thoughts that we have today are the same thoughts we'll have tomorrow. We don't even change our thinking. We're thinking the same thing over and over and over. Well, if it's negative, guess what's going to show up in your life? Negativity. It comes back to that karma thing that I was talking about.
Yeah.
What you think about, you bring about.
Right.
So thinking positive thoughts is not just this new age, woo-woo kind of thing. There's science behind it. That the thoughts that you think creates chemical reactions in your body.
Right.
And if they're positive, the chemical reactions are positive. If they're negative, they're negative chemical reactions in your body. So that's why optimism is so important.
Right. Yeah, I think when you put the numbers to it like that, 50,000 thoughts a day and 80% of that, if they're negative, that really paints a very clear picture of the power of your mind. And I think that's amazing. All right. Yep. I think that's our last question for the day. And I'm so glad that I had another chance to speak to you. And honestly, Michael Taylor, thank you so much for coming on to the Experience Series. It's been an absolute delight. Obviously, thank you so much to everyone who's been tuning in. If you enjoyed this interview, please make sure to like the Experience Series Facebook page. And of course, check out CoachMichaelTaylor.com. He's got a lot of great books. You guys should check them out. A lot of great discourse. And of course, Michael Taylor, enjoy your birthday tomorrow. I hope you have an amazing
and happy birthday to Shailene. Yay!
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. I'm sure we will stay in touch, and I hope you have a great evening. All right.
Thanks again. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to everyone tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care.